Hello and welcome to another session of Basic Digital Marketing. In our last session, we started talking about data analytics, and we actually focused more on the principle side of data analytics. Now, as promised, today things will get a bit more technical as we start looking into one of the most commonly used data analytics tool called Google Analytics. Now, obviously, if you spend one or two sessions only, none of us can become masters of Google Analytics, and that's actually not the objective of this session. The objective is actually to give you a holistic overview of Google Analytics so that you become sufficiently inspired and motivated to pursue this tool on your own and to make the whole process of Google Analytics as simple and as digestible for you. Okay, so let's begin. Before going into Google Analytics, we have to understand another concept which is called a purchase funnel. A purchase funnel basically is about tracking different kinds of online behaviors. The first kind of behavior that we track is what we call an acquisition. An acquisition is basically tracking all kinds of awareness and how different kind of consumer interest level. The second level is what we call a behavior, which tracks all the engagement that the consumers do online. And third and final level is actually about conversion, where a user actually is then turned into an actual consumer. Now, if you have a business that's operating digitally, it's absolutely imperative that you track all this online behavior so that you can get meaningful insight that you can turn into business action. And that's where Google Analytics can play a big role. Google Analytics is a tool or a framework which basically tracks all kinds of online behavior, links it with your business objectives, and basically helps you in making a very useful decision in terms of reaching new and existing users online. Now, where do you start? You simply start by creating a free Google Analytics account. After that, you basically have to add on a tracker code into the web page URL of each of the pages that you're going to track in Google Analytics. So what happens is that every time that page loads, the activity or the information basically sent directly to the Google Analytics for processing, and this information that you're sending is actually called a hit. A hit is nothing but a URL string that carries a lot of very useful information. It carries information like, for example, what the user is using in terms of browser, what language the browser set, where he is from, what kind of a device he is using. So all this useful information is actually inside a hit. If we put it simply, there are actually three kinds of hit. One we call is a page view hit, which is the most commonly used hit, which basically tracks all the pages that someone is viewing. Secondly, there is we call an event hit, which is basically tracking all kinds of interactions or engagement that the consumer or user is doing online. And third is what we call a transaction hit, or at times an e-commerce hit, which by name itself we understand is tracking all kinds of e-commerce and purchases that's happening in your website. Now, with this, we have a clear idea about how Google Analytics tracks the data. Next, we will start looking into how Google Analytics uses or processes that data to come up with meaningful reports. Now, this processing basically takes place step by step. In step one, Google Analytics clubs those data in terms of users. Every time someone logs into a web page, Google Analytics generates a random and unique identifier, which basically gets lodged with the user's browser cookie. As per Google Analytics, every unique identifier is a unique user. So if you are coming into a web page with a unique or new ID, basically Google Analytics treats you as a new user. And when you are coming to that web page, you're returning to that web page with an already existing ID, Google Analytics puts you as a returning user. So that's how he puts the data at first level, new user versus retaining user. In step two, Google Analytics clubs the data in terms of sessions. What is a session? A session is basically, it starts every time when you start navigating or loading into a web page. It starts from there, but after 30 minutes of inactivity, where you're basically not doing anything, after 30 minutes, if you don't do anything, the session ends. And then if you start again, Google Analytics treats it as a new session. So that's the second step where data gets analyzed in terms of session. In third and final level, Google Analytics basically integrates all this data that he gathered from different sources. So after all the data is being processed. Then Google Analytics publishes 4 kinds of report. The first report is what we call an audience report. An audience report has all the general characteristic of the users, like for example his gender, what are the pages that he viewed, whether he's a new user or returning user. All this information comes in the audience report. The second report is what we call an acquisition report, which gives an idea about all the channels that the user has used to come to your website. It can be organic, like unpaid search. It can be paid search, like cost per click. It can be social, or it can be referral, which basically means he has come to your website from other publishers' website. The third report is called a behavior report, which basically tells us all the things he has done in the website itself. For example, which pages he has landed, which pages he has exited. All this information comes in the behavior report. And the final report is what we call a conversion report, which basically tracks, based on the goal that you set for your business and for your website, how you're performing. So we have seen how Google Analytics tracks the data, how it processes the data, and how it publishes different reports. In next session, we'll see how Google Analytics actually tracks the effectiveness of different marketing campaigns, so that you see what kind of return on investment you're getting. So until then, goodbye.